welcome to another episode. In today's episode, I'm going to be introducing this camera right here. This is an Ihagee Parvola. Now, the Ihagee Parvola, as you can see, is a very small camera, first introduced in 1931 in Germany as the Klein Ultrix. Klein in German meaning small, and Ultrix being the name of a series of cameras that Ihagee made through the 1920s and 1930s. Now, this camera is unique in that, unlike all the other Ultrix cameras that Ihagee was producing in the 20s and 30s, which were all bellows folding cameras, this is actually a fixed body, rigid lens extension camera, so did not follow the same design pattern as the rest of the Ultrix line. So as a result, shortly after this camera was introduced in 1931, Ihagee held a competition in order to find a new name for the camera. Now, I've not been able to find very much detailed information about that competition. There's at least one source online that suggests that the competition was held in September of 1931. However, if you look at the 1932 catalog from Ihagee, it still was referring to this camera as the Klein Ultrix. So it seems unlikely that they would have had a naming competition in September of 1931, but still held on to the older name for the 1932 catalog. But whenever that competition was held, I suspect it was probably in 1932. The winning entry was Parvola. And it seems to be a word that's derived from the Latin word parvulus, which can mean very small or tiny. And that reflects the size of the camera and the market that Ihagee was going after at the time. Now, in the English-speaking countries, especially the UK and the US, the Klein Ultrix was first introduced as the Weenie Ultrix. At that time, the word weenie was mainly meant to mean small. And actually, it continued to be marketed as the Weenie Ultrix even beyond the time when it was starting to be referred to as the Parvola. So you'll find advertisements from the UK and the US, even later into the 30s, in which the camera was advertised as the Weenie Ultrix. Now, eventually, the camera was expanded to include 3 different versions. The original one, which is what I have, was designed to shoot a standard size frame on 127 film, and a standard size frame is 4 by 6.5. Later, they introduced 2 additional models, one which shot a half frame, which would be 3 by 4 and oriented in the portrait orientation, and a third camera, which is quite rare, which included the provision for both the full frame 127 and also had an insert for the half frame 127 and could actually shoot on glass plate negatives using a different back. Now, looking at the camera, we can see that it follows the general kind of layout of a rigid lens mount 127 camera of the time, similar to the Virgin Gavaretta or the Nagel Pupil. So it has a simple Albata type viewfinder, which is released with this button here, and has a front and rear lens. The front lens on the viewfinder is equipped with a crosshairs, which you may or may not be able to see. Film was advanced with a very basic wine knob here, and then on the back, you watched the film numbers go by in the red window. Now, for my version, which is the full frame 127, there's just a single red window in the back. For the half frame versions, the 3 by 4 versions, there would be 2 red windows, of course, so that you could get the half size frames in. Like most German cameras of this era, it's a really well finished camera, and it's got really nice leather, really nice detail, both in the leather and also in the metalwork. You can kind of see here, the Ihagee name is embossed in the leather, both on the front as well as on the rear here. Probably hard to see with this light. There's a metal Ihagee nameplate here on the bottom of the camera. My camera also has a second metal nameplate from a camera retailer in Germany, and it appears to be a retailer named Arthur Polster, Optic and Photo in Merseburg. Then if we continue around, we get to probably what is the most distinctive feature of the camera, which is the helicoid lens extender. and that's actuated with this big ring here. As you turn this ring, the helicoid is exposed. You can see it there. And the helicoid is just very obvious, obviously, once the lens is extended. Now, this isn't the only camera of that era to use a helicoid like this, but it is among the first. However, what makes this very unusual compared to even other helicoid cameras is it's actually a double helicoid. So rotating this outer helical screw extends the main focusing block, which is this part back, out of the camera with this part of the helicoid. And then there's an inner helicoid screw here, which is a non-rotating barrel. And so as you're turning the main extension control, it also is extending outside of this ring. So that double action helicoid is quite unusual. This does make it very quick to extend the lens mount and also makes the focusing throw unusually short. You can go from infinity to 1.5 feet or 0.5 meter focus distance in only a 90-degree throw. Now, when you extend the lens mount, the helicoid automatically stops at the infinity focus position, which is indicated right here. And this is accomplished with a little pin on this side of the camera, which is riding in the screw threads and reaches a little stop at the infinity point, and then the little pin drops into the stop and prevents the helicoid from moving any farther. And then to focus closer to infinity, you simply actuate this lever here, which releases that pin, and then you can move the lens mount beyond the infinity mark, which is focusing closer. At that point, you can release the lever, and the little pin will just ride again in the screw until you get to minimum focus distance, which is about 1.5 feet. Now, one clever feature of this camera, if I go back to infinity focus, is this little flap right here. This little hinged flap covers the shutter release when the lens is retracted. So let's say I've got the lens extended and I've just taken a photo. As I push the lens back in, you can see, watch that little flap, it automatically covers up the shutter release lever, so then it's impossible for me to actuate the shutter when the lens is collapsed. This also serves as a reminder to extend the lens before taking a picture, which was a common problem back then. Folks would forget to extend the lens before they took their picture. So once you've extended the lens, that little flap just easily folds out of the way and you have full access to the shutter release lever. Now, like most cameras of this era, the camera was offered in a variety of different quality levels, and those quality levels generally included different lenses and different shutters. Now, my particular camera, I think, is from the early part of the production run. It is missing the little neck strap lugs that would normally be right here on later cameras. It also features a dial set shutter, unlike the later cameras, which all had rim set shutters. And that brings me to one aspect of this camera that I really struggle with, which is this shutter release lever right here. So as you can see, the shutter lever is on the upper left side of the lens barrel. This means as you're taking a picture, first of all, you have to operate it with your left hand. Second of all, to operate it, you're pushing it up and to the right. And that's just an awkward position to try to take a picture with. To compound matters, your access to the lever is actually interfered with by the cable release socket. So it's actually got a very difficult feel as you're taking a picture to move that lever correctly. And then on top of all of that, it's a ever-set shutter. So it's a self-cocking shutter. You simply push the lever and it takes a picture, and you let go, and every time you push it, it takes a picture. That simplifies the process of taking a picture. However, it also means that it's a very long throw and you're not exactly sure when it's going to go off. All that together means I've really had a hard time with camera shake when I use this camera. So what I've done to try to overcome that is I've actually started using a separate cable release even for handheld shots. I've got this old vintage cable release that screws right in. And then when I'm using this, I can simply actuate the shutter separately while I'm holding the camera, and I get a much smoother response. Now, on later versions of the camera, they actually rotated the lens 90 degrees. So the dial was on top of the lens barrel, and that would put the shutter release lever over here on the right, where it's a much more natural position, and you would be pulling down on the lever. So that helped a little bit. I suspect they made that change after receiving feedback from some of the early cameras like mine. So let's go ahead and load up some film in this camera, and we'll take it out shooting, and just like usual, and see what it can do. So I'm going to be demonstrating how to load film into the Ihagee Parvola. It's pretty straightforward. So the entire back comes off of this camera, and once the back is off, you've got full access inside the camera. You take the old spool that you've just finished and move it from the feed side to the take-up side. That will become the take-up. And then once you've got that in place, obviously you're going to proceed with the film. For this particular one, I'm shooting with a roll of Ansco all-weather film that expired in 1964, so it's pretty old, but kind of fun to play with this older film. This film was originally rated at ISO 125, but given the age, I ended up shooting it at ISO 32. So to load the camera, obviously you're going to take the wrapper off of the film. And then once you've got all the little bits of paper off of the leader, pull out a few inches of the leader. That's going to go into the take-up side. This should seem pretty straightforward. If you've seen any other roll film camera loading, it's the same procedure. So once you've got that leader connected to the take-up side, bring the feed side back over to the other side of the camera. It will snap down into position. And then once you've snapped that into position and put a few turns on the take-up side to get the film taut, go ahead and put the back on the camera, snap it in place, and then we will start winding the film past the initial leader to get to that first frame of film. Now this old Ansco film is kind of interesting. It's got a black backing paper with a silver marking, so it's kind of the inverse compared to other cameras. But same procedure, you just go ahead and roll past the initial arrows, and then you'll get to, in this case, it says all weather, and then there's a couple of dots, and then after the dots, you'll get to the first frame. Once the 1 is showing in the red window, you are ready to shoot. So that'll wrap it up for the neat little Parvola. The Parvola, for those who are interested, was made from 1931 to 1939. However, it was pretty much overshadowed pretty quickly by a new camera that Ihagee introduced in 1933, which was, of course, the Exacta. That's a subject for another video. So for now, I will wrap it up, and thank you for watching.